You have seen them. You know exactly who they are. They walk into a crowded room and the energy shifts. Conversations pause, heads turn. Before they even speak a single word, people are drawn to them. When they do speak, their words carry an invisible weight. People agree with them faster, trust them deeper, and remember them longer. They secure the best deals, attract the most loyal allies, and navigate through life's social complexities with an ease that you have seen them. You know exactly who they are. They walk into a crowded room and the energy shifts. Conversations pause, heads turn. Before they even speak a single word, people are drawn to them. When they do speak, their words carry an invisible weight. People agree with them faster, trust them deeper, and remember them longer. They secure the best deals, attract the most loyal allies, and navigate through life's social complexities with an ease that feels almost unfair. What is it that they have? It isn't necessarily physical beauty. Many of history's most magnetic leaders were notably plain. It isn't just raw intelligence. The world is full of unpersuasive geniuses, and it certainly isn't just wealth or status. What they possess is an energetic signature, a psychological gravity. They have charisma. For centuries, society has treated charisma as a mystical gift, a roll of the genetic dice. You are either born with the it factor or you are doomed to a life of blending into the background. You are either the magnetic leader or the invisible follower. But modern psychology, neuroscience, and behavioral economics have completely dismantled this myth. Charisma is not a magic spell. It is not an aura. Charisma is an applied science. It is a specific set of nonverbal cues, vocal tonalities, and internal psychological states that you can learn, practice, and master. Think of charisma as a language. Right now, you might only know a few words, but by the end of this audio journey, you will be fluent. You will understand the hidden mechanics of human attraction and influence. You will learn how to bypass the logical brain of your listener and speak directly to their nervous system. You are about to learn how to flip the switch. You will learn the exact physical and mental habits required to project absolute presence, quiet power, and irresistible warmth. You will learn how to read a room, control the silence, and make anyone you speak with feel like the most important person in the world. If you are ready to stop being overlooked, if you are ready to command respect without raising your voice, and if you are ready to decode the science of magnetic influence, then let us begin. Chapter 1. The Myth of the Natural and the Charisma Switch. Narrator. Shift to a brisk, analytical, and highly confident tone. We are breaking down illusions here. To master charisma, we must first destroy the biggest lie you've been told about it, the idea that charisma is an innate, unchangeable trait. Let me tell you a story about Norma Jean Mortensen. In the summer of 1955, she was walking through the crowded, chaotic streets of New York City, accompanied by a magazine editor. It was a busy afternoon, and the sidewalks were packed. Norma Jean was wearing a plain coat, her hair was unstyled, and she was entirely blending in. Dozens of people bumped past her, completely ignoring her. She was invisible. Then she turned to the editor and asked a simple question. "Do you want to see her?" The editor, confused, nodded. Norma Jean didn't change her clothes. She didn't put on makeup. But internally, something shifted. Her posture straightened slightly. The rhythm of her walk changed. Her gaze shifted from the pavement to the people around her, projecting a sudden, intense energy. Within 3 seconds, the street stopped. People gasped. Crowds suddenly swarmed her. Traffic ground to a halt. Because, in that 3-second shift of internal energy and body language, Norma Jean Mortensen had turned into her alter ego, Marilyn Monroe. She proved a fundamental scientific truth. Charisma is not something you are. Charisma is something you do. It is a state you can turn on and off. The science of mirror neurons. Why does this work? The secret lies in a cluster of cells in your brain known as mirror neurons. Mirror neurons are the neurological foundation of human empathy and connection. When you watch someone take a bite of a lemon, your mouth puckers. When you see someone accidentally hit their thumb with a hammer, you wince. Your brain is literally mirroring the emotional and physical state of the person you are observing. This means that human emotions are highly contagious. We call this emotional contagion. Here is the golden rule of the science of charisma. Whatever internal state you are experiencing, your micro-expressions, your body language, and your vocal tone will broadcast it to the room. And because of mirror neurons, the room will catch it like a virus. If you walk into a meeting feeling anxious, inadequate, and rushed, you don't even need to speak. Your shallow breathing, your tight shoulders, and your darting eyes will transmit anxiety. The mirror neurons of the people in the room will pick up on your anxiety, and suddenly they will feel uneasy around you. They won't know why, but they will instinctively distrust your message. But if you learn to internally generate a state of calm, grounded power, if your breathing is slow, your shoulders are relaxed, and your gaze is steady, you will infect the room with confidence. People will feel safe around you. They will feel inspired by you. Charisma, therefore, starts entirely in your own mind. You do not need to change your personality. You do not need to become an extrovert if you are naturally introverted. Some of the most charismatic people in history, like Abraham Lincoln or Gandhi, were deep introverts. Instead, you must master the 3 core pillars of charismatic behavior: presence, power, and warmth. When you combine these 3 elements, you create a chemical reaction in the brains of the people around you. Let's begin with the rarest and most difficult to master pillar: absolute presence. Chapter 2: The Rarest Commodity, Absolute Presence. Narrator: slow down. The tone here should be intense, focused, and intimate. Make the listener feel the weight of presence. Think about the last time you had a conversation with someone and you could just tell they weren't there. Their eyes slightly glazed over. They checked their phone. They gave generic responses like, "Oh wow, crazy." Or worse, you could see their eyes darting around, waiting for their turn to speak so they could jump in with their own story. How did that make you feel? Unimportant, dismissed, invisible. Now, reverse it. Think of a time you spoke with someone who made you feel like you were the only person in the universe. They maintained deep eye contact. They didn't interrupt. They listened to understand, not just to reply. When you left that interaction, you probably thought, "Wow, what an incredible person." This is the power of absolute presence. In our hyper-connected, notification-driven, utterly distracted modern world, true presence is the rarest commodity on earth. Giving someone your undivided attention is the highest form of psychological respect you can offer. When you are fully present with someone, their brain releases dopamine and oxytocin, the neurochemicals associated with pleasure, trust, and bonding. You literally make them feel physically good simply by paying attention to them. But presence is incredibly difficult. The human brain is designed to be a prediction machine, constantly scanning the environment for threats or planning the future. Studies show that our minds wander roughly 47% of the time. This means that half the time you are speaking to someone, your brain is actually thinking about what you're having for dinner, an email you forgot to send, or worrying about how your hair looks. And here's the brutal truth: people know you're faking it. The human face has over 40 muscles capable of producing thousands of micro-expressions. These micro-expressions flash across your face in a fraction of a second. If your mind wanders for even a moment during a conversation, your eyes will physically micro-focus, your facial muscles will slightly relax, and the person talking to you will subconsciously register that you have abandoned them. The charismatic connection breaks instantly. To be charismatic, you must train your brain to stay anchored in the current moment. Practice Application 1: The Toe Wiggle Grounding Technique. How do you force a wandering mind back into the present moment during a high-stakes conversation? You use physiology. You cannot think your way out of a distracted mind. You must pull your consciousness back into your physical body. Here is a technique used by elite public speakers and negotiators called the grounding anchor. The next time you are in a conversation and you feel your mind drifting to what you want to say next, or you feel anxiety rising, do this. Focus all of your mental attention on the physical sensation of your toes inside your shoes. Wiggle them slightly. Feel the texture of your socks. Feel the pressure of the floor against your heels. It sounds ridiculously simple, but the neuroscience behind it is profound. Your brain has a limited amount of conscious bandwidth. By forcing your brain to process intense physical sensations from the furthest extremities of your body, you instantly short-circuit the anxiety loop in your prefrontal cortex. You pull your attention out of your racing thoughts and anchor it entirely in the present physical moment. Your eyes will refocus, your micro-expressions will reset, and the person you are speaking with will instantly feel your presence return to them. Practice application 2. The 2-second pause. Most people treat conversation like a game of ping pong. The moment one person stops talking, the other immediately hits the ball back. This proves you weren't actually listening. You were just waiting for your turn to fire. To project massive presence, implement the 2-second pause. When someone finishes speaking, do not reply immediately. Hold their eye contact, let your face absorb what they just said, and silently count. 1, 2, then begin your response. This 2-second silence is devastatingly powerful. First, it tells the other person that their words were so important, so profound, that you needed a moment to mentally process them. It is the ultimate compliment. Second, it allows you to actually formulate a thoughtful response, rather than reacting from instinct. Third, it projects immense confidence. Nervous people rush to fill silence. Charismatic people own the silence. Presence is the foundation. If you are not present, nothing else matters. But presence alone only makes you a good listener. To be truly magnetic, you must combine presence with the second pillar, the architecture of power. Chapter 3. The architecture of power: space, posture, and resonance. When we hear the word power, we often associate it with aggression, dominance, or physical strength. We picture the boss who yells, the bully who intimidates, or the person who talks over everyone. But in the science of charisma, that is not power. That is insecurity masquerading as force. True charismatic power is not about dominating others. It is the projection of absolute capability. It is the subconscious signal you send to the room that says, "I am competent, I am secure, I can affect the world around me, and I am not easily shaken." We are biologically hardwired to seek out and follow powerful individuals. For our ancient ancestors, staying close to the most capable person in the tribe meant the difference between surviving the winter and starving. Today, we don't need protection from saber-toothed tigers, but our brains still scan every room for the person who exudes the most capability. We want to hire them, we want to follow them, and we want to be associated with them. How do you project this power without saying a word? It begins with how you occupy physical space. The psychology of space and status. In the animal kingdom, status is entirely dictated by size and space. The alpha male gorilla puffs out his chest and takes up as much room as possible. The subordinate gorilla shrinks, hunches over, and tries to make himself small to avoid a threat. Humans are no different. When we feel insecure, anxious, or out of our depth, our bodies naturally assume a protective fetal posture. We cross our arms over our vital organs. We hunch our shoulders forward. We tuck our chins down. We try to take up as little physical space as possible. The problem is that body language is a two-way street. Your mind dictates your posture, but your posture also dictates your mind. If you sit in a hunched, contracted position, your brain receives signals from your body that say, "We are under threat. We are small." In response, your endocrine system decreases testosterone, the hormone associated with confidence and risk-taking, and spikes cortisol, the stress hormone. You literally chemically engineer yourself to feel weak. To project charismatic power, you must claim your space. Imagine a string attached to the crown of your head, pulling you gently upward, aligning your spine. Let your shoulders drop back and down. Uncross your arms. Plant your feet firmly shoulder-width apart. When you sit at a conference table, don't keep your arms glued to your ribs. Claim the armrests. Put your notebook slightly further out on the table. You don't need to aggressively sprawl, but you must signal to your own brain and to the room that you are comfortable occupying the space you are in. This open, expansive posture lowers your cortisol, raises your testosterone, and triggers the mirror neurons in others to recognize you as a high-status individual. The vocal tonality of authority, the downward inflection. If your posture is the visual representation of power, your vocal tonality is the auditory weapon of charisma. You can have the most brilliant ideas in the world, but if your voice sounds thin, nasal, or unsure, no one will follow you. The most common mistake people make when trying to be polite or agreeable is using the upward inflection. This happens when your pitch slightly rises at the very end of a sentence, making a statement sound like a question. "I think we should launch the product next week, right?" When you use the upward inflection, you are subconsciously asking the listener for validation and approval. You are signaling that you are not entirely sure of your own words. It destroys your authority instantly. Powerful communicators use the downward inflection. Imagine hitting a period at the end of your sentence with a heavy lead weight. Your pitch should remain steady and drop significantly on the final few words. "I think we should launch the product next week." The downward inflection signals finality. It signals certainty. It says, "This is a fact and it is not up for debate." This is often referred to as the late-night FM DJ voice. It is calm, resonant, and deeply grounded. Practice application 3, the resonant chest exercise. To develop this powerful, authoritative tone, you must stop speaking from your throat and start speaking from your chest. Throat speaking sounds high, thin, and anxious. Chest speaking sounds rich, warm, and dominant. Before a major presentation or a high-stakes meeting, find a quiet space and perform this physical vocal warm-up. Stand up straight and place your hand flat against your chest bone. Take a deep breath directly into your stomach, not your chest. Your stomach should expand outward like a balloon. As you exhale slowly, hum a low, deep note with your lips closed. Focus entirely on making the vibration happen right beneath your hand on your chest. You should literally feel the bone buzzing. Do this 5 times. Then open your mouth and say on that exact same low pitch, "My name is," your name, "and I am here." Notice how different your voice sounds. It will be an octave lower, richer, and heavier. When you speak with this resonance, people don't just hear your words, they feel the physical vibration of your voice in the room. That is the sound of absolute authority. But a warning, projecting power without the final pillar of charisma will backfire horribly. If you project absolute presence and unyielding power, you will not be seen as charismatic. You will be seen as arrogant, cold, and intimidating. People might obey you out of fear, but they will not be magnetically drawn to you. To turn raw power into true charisma, you must master the alchemy of the third pillar. You must master the magnetism of warmth. Chapter 4. The Magnetism of Warmth. In our previous chapter, we built the architecture of power. You learned how to occupy physical space, how to lower your vocal resonance, and how to project an aura of absolute capability. But here is the inherent danger of power. Power without presence makes you aloof and disconnected. Power without warmth makes you a tyrant. If you walk into a room and project unyielding, dominant power, people will undoubtedly notice you. They will step out of your way. They may even obey your directives, but they will not like you. In fact, their evolutionary biology will register you as a potential threat. You will trigger their defensive mechanisms, the ancient fight or flight response governed by the amygdala. While you may command their fear and their compliance in the short term, you will never capture their authentic loyalty. True, world-bending charisma is found in a rare, almost magical intersection, the combination of high power and high warmth. Think of it like an evolutionary equation. When our ancient ancestors encountered a new human on the African savanna, their brains had to answer two vital questions in a fraction of a second to ensure survival. Question 1, how much power does this person have? Are they capable of killing me, or are they capable of protecting me? Question 2, what are their intentions towards me? Are they a... Chapter 4, the magnetism of warmth. In our previous chapter, we built the architecture of power. You learned how to occupy physical space, how to lower your vocal resonance, and how to project an aura of absolute capability. But here is the inherent danger of power. Power without presence makes you aloof and disconnected. Power without warmth makes you a tyrant. If you walk into a room and project unyielding, dominant power, people will undoubtedly notice you. They will step out of your way. They may even obey your directives, but they will not like you. In fact, their evolutionary biology will register you as a potential threat. You will trigger their defensive mechanisms, the ancient fight or flight response governed by the amygdala. While you may command their fear and their compliance in the short term, you will never capture their authentic loyalty. True, world-bending charisma is found in a rare, almost magical intersection, the combination of high power and high warmth. Think of it like an evolutionary equation. When our ancient ancestors encountered a new human on the African savanna, their brains had to answer two vital questions in a fraction of a second to ensure survival. Question 1, how much power does this person have? Are they capable of killing me, or are they capable of protecting me? Question 2, what are their intentions towards me? Are they a friend, or are they a foe? Your posture and your vocal downward inflection answer the first question. Your warmth answers the second. When you project high power, signaling that you have the capacity to move mountains and alter reality, combined with high warmth, signaling that you will use that immense power to help and elevate the person you are interacting with, you become psychologically irresistible. This is the exact profile of the benevolent king, the visionary leader, the beloved mentor, and the ultimate seducer. Consider historical figures like Nelson Mandela. He possessed an unbreakable, diamond-hard inner power forged through decades of imprisonment. Yet when he spoke to his captors or his citizens, his face radiated a profound, undeniable warmth and forgiveness. That specific combination single-handedly prevented a civil war and united a fractured nation. So how do we project this level of warmth without sacrificing the power we just built? First, we must define what warmth actually is. It has absolutely nothing to do with being overly nice, constantly smiling like a fool, or people-pleasing. In fact, the desperate need to please others completely destroys your power. It signals that your status is lower than theirs. Warmth, in the charismatic sense, is the projection of goodwill, unconditional acceptance, and psychological safety. It is the ability to make the person across from you feel seen, valued, and protected in your presence. The evolutionary biology of the face, the Duchenne Smile. The quickest and most primal way humans assess warmth is through the face, specifically through the mechanics of a smile. But science tells us that not all smiles are created equal. When we are nervous, when we are trying to appease an aggressive boss, or when we're faking politeness at a networking event, we use what behavioral scientists call a Pan Am smile, named after the forced artificial smiles of 1950s flight attendants. In a Pan Am smile, only the zygomatic major muscles move. The lips pull back, the teeth show, but the top half of the face remains entirely dead and frozen. Because this smile is controlled by the motor cortex, we can force it on command. However, the human brain is an extraordinary threat detection machine. It instantly decodes a Pan Am smile as fake. It signals manipulation, hidden agendas, or submissiveness, never true warmth. True, charismatic warmth requires the activation of the Duchenne smile. Named after the French neurologist Guillaume Duchenne, this smile involves the involuntary contraction of the orbicularis oculi, the delicate muscles around the eyes. When you experience genuine warmth, amusement, or affection, these muscles flex. The corners of your eyes crinkle into crow's feet. Your cheeks lift naturally. The smile engages the entire face, reaching all the way up to your brow line. Because the orbicularis oculi muscles are tied to the limbic system, the emotional center of the brain, and are incredibly difficult to flex voluntarily, a Duchenne smile is the universal biological proof of genuine goodwill. It is the ultimate friend signal. You cannot fake a Duchenne smile by simply commanding your face to look happy. If you try, you will look like a psychopath. You have to actually change your internal emotional state. Remember the absolute rule of mirror neurons we discussed in Chapter 1. Your face will effortlessly broadcast whatever emotion you are truly feeling inside. Practice Application 4. The Favorite Person Visualization. To instantly project magnetic, Duchenne-level warmth before entering a high-stakes room, a tense negotiation, or a crucial date, you must use a psychological hack known as the favorite person visualization. Before you turn the handle and open the door, stop. Close your eyes for 2 seconds. Bring to mind a person or even an animal for whom you have absolute, uncomplicated, unconditional affection. It could be your child, your lifelong best friend, your spouse, or a childhood pet. Visualize their face in vivid detail. Remember a moment when they made you laugh, or a moment when you felt profound gratitude for their existence. Your brain doesn't know the chemical difference between a vividly imagined scenario and current reality. By visualizing someone you love, your brain instantly floods your nervous system with oxytocin, the neurochemical responsible for bonding and trust. The physical effects are instantaneous. The tension in your jaw will melt away. The micro muscles around your eyes will soften. Your breathing will deepen. When you open your eyes and walk into the room, your face will hold the residual micro-expressions of deep, authentic affection. You will look at the stranger, the interviewer, or the client in front of you, but your eyes will carry the warmth of a lifelong friend. This technique is devastatingly effective. Because of emotional contagion, the mirror neurons of the person you are speaking to will catch that oxytocin release. They will feel an instant, inexplicable bond with you. They will feel safe, accepted, and valued, all before you have even introduced yourself. You have hacked their nervous system with kindness. Chapter 5. The Weaponized Pause and the Gravity of Silence. We have already discussed the 2-second pause as a tool for charismatic listening. Now we must evolve. We must master silence not just as a courtesy, but as an active, tactical weapon of influence. In modern society, particularly in the West, silence is treated like an enemy. We're terrified of the void. We fill it with ums, ahs, likes, and nervous laughter. We rush to finish other people's sentences to prove we're engaged. We over-explain our ideas, rambling on, because the quiet space that follows our own words feels utterly terrifying. Anxious people fill the void. Powerful people control the void. When you learn to tolerate and eventually weaponize silence, your charisma and your perceived authority will multiply exponentially. Let's look at the highest stakes imaginable: hostage negotiation. Chris Voss, the former lead international kidnapping negotiator for the FBI, frequently cites the strategic pause or the dynamic silence as one of the most effective and devastating tools in his entire psychological arsenal. Why does it work so well? Because nature abhors a vacuum, and human psychology absolutely despises an awkward silence. When you are in a conversation, there is an invisible rhythm of turn-taking. If you make a strong statement or ask a high-impact open-ended question, and then you simply stop talking, refusing to yield the floor but refusing to speak, the psychological pressure on the other person becomes immense. Their amygdala begins to sound an alarm. The silence feels like a social rupture. Their brain will desperately scramble to fill the void to restore social harmony. In their panic to fill the silence, they will often elaborate on their previous position, offer unprompted and highly valuable concessions, negotiate against themselves, or reveal their true hidden insecurities. All of this leverage is handed to you simply because you had the psychological discipline to keep your mouth shut. The neuroscience of the three silences. Charismatic speakers and elite communicators do not use silence randomly. They use it surgically. There are three distinct types of weaponized silence you must master. 1. The anticipatory pause, the setup. This is the silence used right before you deliver a critical piece of information. If you're giving a presentation and you say, "And the real reason our profits are down is because of our marketing," it sounds like a passing thought. It vanishes into the air. But if you add the anticipatory pause, "And the real reason our profits are down," pause for 3 full seconds, making deep eye contact with the room, is our marketing. That silence acts as a psychological highlighter. It frames your words in gold. It forces the audience's brains to lean in, heightening their focus, telling them, "What I am about to say next is profound. Prepare yourselves." The absorption pause, the landing. This is the silence used immediately after you drop a major insight or a heavy truth. Novice speakers rush into their next sentence because they're afraid of losing the crowd. Charismatic speakers drop a profound thought and then stand in the silence, forcing the audience to sit with the weight of the words. It signals supreme confidence. It says, "I know what I just said is brilliant. I will give your mind a moment to catch up to it." The reversal pause, the pressure transfer. This is used in conflicts or negotiations. When someone makes an unreasonable demand or an aggressive statement, do not react, do not argue. Simply look at them, maintain a relaxed, unbothered facial expression, and stay completely silent for 4 seconds. The silence acts as a mirror, reflecting their aggression back onto them. It makes their demand hang awkwardly in the air, often prompting them to immediately backpedal or soften their stance without you having to lift a finger. Practice application. 5. The uncomfortable silence tolerance training. You cannot weaponize silence until you inoculate yourself against the anxiety it causes. You must train your nervous system to handle awkward silences without flinching, without breaking eye contact, and without nervously smiling. The next time you are asked a difficult or challenging question, whether in a job interview, a board meeting, or a heated argument with a partner, do not answer immediately. Look them directly in the eye. Keep your facial muscles completely relaxed. Do not nod. Do not say, or "let me think." Just hold their gaze and silently count. 1, 2, 3. At first, this will feel agonizing. Your heart rate will spike. Your brain will scream at you to say something, anything, to break the tension. Ignore the panic. Anchor your feet to the floor. Focus on your breathing. Tolerate the burn of the silence. Let them squirm in it. When you finally do speak, do not rush. Your voice should drop into that low, resonant, downward inflection we practiced in Chapter 3. You will not sound defensive or panicked. You will sound like a Supreme Court judge handing down a carefully considered verdict. You will project the intoxicating aura of someone who has absolute control over time itself. Chapter 6: The Invisible Architecture, Conversational Framing. Now, the tone here should become slightly sharper, highly analytical and tactical. This is the dark psychology segment. We're pulling back the curtain on the hidden mechanics of human interaction. If absolute presence, grounded power, and magnetic warmth are the fuel that powers the engine of charisma, then framing is the steering wheel. It dictates exactly where the interaction is going. To understand conversational framing, we must briefly step into the realm of what some call dark psychology. I use that term not because these techniques are inherently evil or malicious, but because they operate entirely in the shadows of the subconscious mind. 99% of people rarely realize these dynamics are happening, yet they completely dictate the outcome of every human interaction, from a first date to a billion-dollar merger. In every single conversation, there is an invisible psychological boundary established. This boundary is called the frame. The frame dictates the underlying context and the rules of the interaction. It determines who holds the authority, who is the prize to be won, who is acting as the judge, and who is desperately seeking approval. When two people meet, their frames collide. The stronger frame absorbs the weaker frame. Here is the absolute, unbreakable law of framing. Whoever is reacting to the other person has lost the frame. The person who controls the frame controls the reality of the conversation. The person who finds themselves trying to explain themselves, justifying their past actions, answering rapid-fire questions, or seeking validation has surrendered their power. They have been absorbed into the other person's reality. Imagine a standard corporate job interview. The default societal frame is this: the company is the ultimate prize, the interviewer is the omnipotent judge, and the applicant is a subordinate begging for access and a paycheck. In this frame, the interviewer asks the questions, the applicant reacts, justifies their resume, and hopes to be chosen. A highly charismatic, high-status person walks into that exact same interview and subtly, seamlessly flips the frame. They project intense warmth and respect, but their underlying language and behavior imply a completely different reality. I am a highly valuable, scarce asset. My time is precious. I am interviewing you and your company to see if you are worthy of my talent and my energy. They don't say this out loud. That would be incredibly arrogant and abrasive. They achieve the frame flip entirely through the mechanics of how they navigate the conversation. The law of least effort and the refusal to justify. Weak communicators constantly over-explain. They suffer from verbal diarrhea when placed under pressure. If an interviewer asks aggressively, "Why is there a 6-month gap in your resume last year? What were you doing?" A weak communicator panics. They feel the pressure of the interviewer's frame. They give a 5-minute, rambling, anxious story about their personal issues, apologizing along the way, seeking the interviewer's understanding or sympathy. They are reacting. They are justifying. They have completely lost the frame. A charismatic communicator, operating from a frame of high value, gives a high-power, low-effort response. I took 6 months off to travel and recalibrate my long-term strategic goals. It was an incredibly valuable period of growth. Now I'm completely focused and ready to build. Tell me, what is the single biggest operational challenge your team is facing right now? Notice the hidden architecture of what just happened there. No justification or apology. They answered the question directly and confidently, framing the gap as a strategic choice, not a failure. They did not apologize. They did not seek pity. Economy of words. They used as few words as possible. In power dynamics, the person who speaks the most is usually the one seeking approval. The person who speaks the least holds the most power. Flipping the script. This is the most crucial part. They ended their short, punchy answer with an open-ended question of their own. The person asking the questions controls the frame. By ending with a targeted question, the charismatic individual forces the interviewer out of the judge role and into the answering role. They force the company to start explaining and justifying their challenges. The power dynamic flips instantly, but it is done with such smooth professionalism that no offense is taken. The amused mastery frame and defeating the challenge. When you begin to project high levels of charisma and confidence, people will inevitably test you. It is human nature. They will challenge you, offer a slight insult, or aggressively question your logic to see if your confidence is real or just a facade. When challenged, your natural biological instinct is to defend yourself. You want to get angry, you want to raise your voice, or you want to eagerly pull out facts and figures to prove them wrong. The moment you get angry, defensive, or overly eager to prove yourself, they own your frame. They push the psychological button and you reacted exactly like a marionette on a string. You proved that their opinion has power over your emotional state. Charismatic people neutralize challenges using a highly advanced frame called amused mastery. When someone challenges them, they do not get angry, they do not get defensive. They treat the aggression or the insult like a cute, slightly ridiculous behavior from a toddler. They smile, a genuine, warm Duchenne smile, not a mocking smirk, and they hold the silence. Imagine you're pitching a project and a colleague leans back, crosses their arms, and says aggressively, "Your entire proposal is totally unrealistic and a waste of our budget." Do not react with panic. No, it isn't. If you look at the data on page 4, you'll see the projections are solid. This is highly reactive, defensive, and weak. Instead, deploy amused mastery. Hold the 2-second pause. Let their aggression hang in the air. Smile slightly, as if they just told a mildly entertaining joke. Look them dead in the eyes and say calmly with a downward inflection, "That is a very interesting perspective, John. What specifically in the data makes you say that?" You have not conceded your point, you have not raised your voice, you have not insulted them back, but by remaining completely, unnervingly, emotionally unaffected by their attack, and by effortlessly batting the burden of proof back onto them, you have swallowed their frame whole. You look like the calm, collected adult in the room. They look like the emotional child throwing a tantrum. The rest of the room will immediately recognize who holds the true power. Practice application 6, the question pivot. For the next 48 hours, try this psychological exercise in your daily conversations, whether at work or at home. Whenever someone asks you a question, makes a passive-aggressive statement, or offers an unsolicited critique that puts you on the defensive, absolutely refuse the urge to over-explain or justify yourself. Answer their statement in one short declarative sentence and immediately pivot by asking an open-ended how or what question that forces them to explain their thought process. Coworker, why did you format the report this way? It looks really weird. You, it's optimized for the new analytics software. What specific format were you hoping to see? Partner, you're always working late recently. You, this quarter requires a heavy push to secure the promotion. How would you like us to spend our weekend together to reconnect? You remain exceptionally warm, you remain deeply present, but you violently refuse to let them dictate the terms of your reality or put you on trial. You hold the frame. Take a breath. You now possess the foundational, hidden elements of human magnetism. You understand the profound, drug-like empathy of absolute presence. You hold the architectural, unyielding weight of grounded power. You know how to project the irresistible, psychological safety of warmth. And you know how to protect your energy and control reality using conversational framing and the devastation of silence. But what happens when you take these potent individual skills and try to apply them to a chaotic, unpredictable environment? What happens when you walk into a networking event filled with 50 strangers, or when you're thrust into a high-conflict group negotiation where everyone is losing their minds and screaming for dominance? In Part 3, we will decode the ultimate, final test of charisma. We will explore the complex mechanics of group dynamics, the brutal, unforgiving psychology of first impressions, and exactly how to maintain your magnetic gravity when the world around you is spinning completely out of control. Chapter 7, The Psychology of First Impressions and the Thin Slice. Welcome to the final frontier of magnetic influence. In Part 1 and Part 2, we isolated the individual variables of the charisma code. We dissected the deep, grounding roots of absolute presence. We built the unyielding physical architecture of power. We unlocked the biological, oxytocin-driven triggers of warmth, and we explored the tactical, sometimes devastating use of the weaponized pause and conversational framing. If you were interacting with humanity in a vacuum, one-on-one, with unlimited time to prove your worth, those skills alone alone would make you an unstoppable force. But humanity does not exist in a vacuum. The real world is chaotic, it's loud, it's brutally judgmental, deeply impatient, and constantly shifting. Before you can deploy the nuance of conversational framing or the empathy of a Duchenne smile, you have to survive the most ruthless, unforgiving psychological gauntlet in the human experience, the first impression. We like to tell ourselves that we're rational, logical creatures who take the time to evaluate others based on their character, their resume, and their spoken ideas. This is a comforting lie. Evolutionary biology dictates a much harsher reality. When you walk into a room, before a single syllable leaves your mouth, the brains of everyone looking at you have already made their minds. The neuroscience of thin slicing. Psychologists use a term called thin slicing. It refers to the human brain's terrifying ability to find patterns, infer intention, and make incredibly complex judgments based on extremely narrow slices of experience or observation. In a landmark study at Princeton University, researchers found that it takes a human being exactly 1/10 of a second, 100 milliseconds, to form a judgment about a stranger's trustworthiness, competence, aggressiveness, and likability based solely on their face and posture. Giving the subjects more time to look at the stranger did not change their initial judgment. It only made them more confident in the snap judgment they had already made. Why does our brain do this? Because for our ancestors, taking the time to carefully evaluate whether a stranger from another tribe was a threat or a friend usually resulted in death. The amygdala, the brain's threat detection center, had to make instantaneous life or death calculations based on micro cues, the tension in a jawline, the width of a stance, the trajectory of a gaze. Your modern brain is running this exact same ancient software in the boardroom, on a blind date, and at a networking event. The halo effect, the gravity of the first 100 milliseconds. The reason thin slicing is so critical to charisma is due to a cognitive bias known as the halo effect. The halo effect is a psychological phenomenon where your initial overall impression of a person dictates how you interpret every single thing they do afterward. The first impression acts as a lens through which all future data is filtered. If you make a weak, nervous, or aloof first impression in that initial 1/10 of a second, the halo effect works against you, often called the horns effect. If you later make a brilliant point in the room will subconsciously view it as a fluke. If you try to project warmth later, it will be viewed as manipulative or needy. But if you nail those first 100 milliseconds, if you walk through the door projecting the precise intersection of high power and high warmth, the halo effect becomes a force multiplier for your charisma. When you make a mistake, it will be viewed as an endearing quirk. When you remain silent, it will be viewed as profound wisdom. When you are aggressive, it will be viewed as necessary leadership. You must master the art of the entrance. You must control the thin slice. The mechanics of the entrance. Most people ruin their first impression before they even fully cross the threshold of the door. They walk into a crowded room, a party, or an interview while simultaneously checking their phone, adjusting their clothing, or nervously scanning the room with darting eyes to see who is looking at them. Their physical posture is contracted. Their energy is chaotic. They are reacting to the room, which, as we learned in the laws of framing, instantly signals low status. A highly charismatic individual treats the doorway as a psychological stage. 1. The threshold reset. Before you touch the door handle, you must run a physical and mental reset. You use the toe wiggle technique to force your mind into the present moment. You drop your shoulders down and back, opening the chest to maximize your physical space and spike your testosterone. You take one deep diaphragmatic breath to lower your heart rate. You visualize your favorite person to trigger the oxytocin release and soften the micro muscles around your eyes into a state of genuine warmth. You engineer your internal state before you are observed. 2. The sweeping gaze. When you walk through the door, do not look down at the floor. Do not immediately seek out the one person you know. Keep your chin parallel to the ground. As you enter, perform a slow, smooth, sweeping gaze across the room. This signals massive confidence. Subconsciously, it tells the room, I am not a prey animal nervously checking for predators. I am an apex presence calmly surveying my environment. 3. The 3-second lock. When you make eye contact with the person you are meeting, whether it is the hiring manager, the host of the party, or your date, lock onto their eyes. Do not break the gaze as you walk toward them. This sustained eye contact from a distance builds incredible psychological tension. For the receiver, it creates a sudden spike of adrenaline and dopamine. They feel an intense localized pressure, a feeling of being uniquely chosen out of the crowd. 4. The warm break and the symmetrical handshake. As you close the distance, you must release the tension before it becomes predatory or aggressive. When you are about 4 feet away, let the Duchenne smile break across your face. You transition instantly from intense power to magnetic warmth. When you shake hands, keep your hand perfectly vertical. A palm facing up signals submissiveness. A palm facing down signals a desperate need for dominance. A perfectly vertical handshake combined with a firm but relaxed grip signals the ultimate charismatic trait. We are equals, and I am thrilled to meet you. Practice application 7. The doorway anchor. To make this complex sequence automatic, you must build a neurological trigger. We will use a technique called anchoring. For the next week, every single time you walk through a doorway, whether it is the door to your bedroom, the entrance to a coffee shop, or the elevator doors opening at work, use the door frame as your anchor. The moment your shoulder passes the frame of the door, force your posture to expand. Drop your shoulders, lift your chin, and take a deep breath. At first, you will have to consciously remind yourself, but by tying the physical action of expanding your posture to the physical environment of a doorway, you are rewiring your basal ganglia. Within a few weeks, your brain will automatically trigger the charismatic state the exact moment you enter any new room, completely bypassing your conscious effort. You will literally become incapable of making a weak entrance. Chapter 8. The Mechanics of Group Dynamics and Social Gravity. The narrator here is steady and strategic. We are shifting from individual tactics to the complex chess match of group psychology. Speak with the tone of a master tactician mapping out a battlefield. You have mastered the entrance. You have controlled the thin slice. The halo effect is working in your favor. Now you are in the room. You are standing in a circle of 5, 10, or 50 people. Everything you learned in the previous chapters must now be scaled. Group dynamics are infinitely more complex than one-on-one interactions because the human brain is a tribal organ. The moment 3 or more people gather, an invisible subconscious hierarchy is instantly formed. The group brain immediately begins running algorithms to determine who is the leader, who is the follower, who provides value, and who leeches energy. There is a devastating misconception about how to command a group. Most people believe that the person who talks the most, tells the loudest jokes, and constantly interrupts others is the alpha of the group. This is entirely false. That person is not charismatic, they are an energy vampire. They are desperately performing to seek validation from the group. The group may tolerate them, but they do not respect them. In the mechanics of framing, the loud performer is reacting to the silence, desperately trying to prove their worth. True charisma in a group setting does not look like a loud explosion. It looks like a black hole. It is quiet, dense, and possesses an inescapable gravitational pull. The most charismatic person in the group is rarely the one doing the most talking. They are the one doing the most directing. They are the center of the social gravity. How do you become the center of gravity without dominating the airwaves? You use a combination of spatial positioning, value distribution, and eye contact geometry. 1. The geometry of space. Holding the center. In a group circle, status is represented by how people look and how they align their bodies. Lower status individuals will constantly shift their feet and angle their torsos toward the highest status person. To claim high status, you must hold the center. When you are standing in a group, plant your feet firmly. Do not constantly pivot your entire body every time a new person speaks. Instead, keep your core and your hips relatively still and use only your head and neck to look at the active speaker. By keeping your body anchored, you signal that you are the immovable object in the room. Subconsciously, the rest of the group will slowly begin to adjust their positioning to orient themselves around you. You have physically established yourself as the anchor of the group's architecture. 2. The lighthouse eye contact technique. When a nervous or low-status person tells a story to a group, they usually lock eyes with only one person, typically the person they perceive as having the highest status. They are subconsciously begging that specific person for approval. If the high-status person laughs, the storyteller feels validated. If the high-status person looks away, the storyteller's confidence collapses. When a charismatic person speaks to a group, they use the lighthouse technique. As you speak, you slowly pan your eye contact around the entire circle, exactly like the sweeping beam of a lighthouse. You make deep 1-second eye contact with one person to deliver a clause of a sentence, then smoothly transition your gaze to the next person for the next clause.
Crucially, you do not just look at the most important people in the circle. You make a deliberate point to lock eyes with the quietest, lowest status people in the group. This achieves two massive psychological victories. First, it prevents you from looking like you are seeking any single individual's approval. You are dispensing your attention equally, signaling supreme confidence. Second, by making deep eye contact with the quiet or marginalized people in the group, you flood their brains with oxytocin. You make them feel seen and valued. Because you possess the high power, giving them your attention elevates their status. They will become fiercely, subconsciously loyal to you. 3. The inclusion pivot and stealing the frame. Inevitably, when you interact in groups, you will encounter the loud dominator. This is the person who talks over everyone, constantly interrupts, and tries to suck all the oxygen out of the room to feed their own ego. When the loud dominator interrupts you, your biological instinct is either to shrink back in defeat or raise your voice to shout over them. Both reactions destroy your charisma. If you shrink, you lose your power. If you shout, you lose your warmth and look reactive. To defeat the loud dominator and steal the social gravity of the entire group, you use the most advanced framing technique in social psychology, the inclusion pivot. Here is how it works. You are speaking. The loud dominator loudly interrupts you and begins rambling about their own story. Step 1. Do not show annoyance. Maintain amused mastery. Keep your face completely relaxed. Step 2. Let them speak for a few seconds. Allow them to expend their energy. Step 3. Look around the circle, find the quietest person in the group who is being ignored by the loud dominator, and deploy the pivot. While the loud dominator is still talking, you gently raise a hand, look at the quiet person, and say with a calm, warm, downward inflection, "Hold on 1 second, John." Addressing the dominator calmly, "Sarah, before John interrupted, you looked like you had a thought on this. What were you about to say?" Notice the absolute devastation of this psychological maneuver. You did not shout, you did not get angry, but in one smooth motion, you acted as the social traffic cop. You firmly established the boundary with the dominator, demonstrating that their loud behavior does not intimidate you. Simultaneously, you took your massive social power and used it to rescue and elevate the quietest person in the room. The quiet person, Sarah, will view you as a savior. The rest of the group will instantly recognize you as the true, benevolent leader of the circle, because true leaders protect the tribe. The loud dominator's frame is shattered. You have swallowed the social gravity of the entire room, and you did it entirely through the magnetism of warmth and control. Practice Application 8, the Orchestra Conductor. The next time you're in a group setting, a family dinner, a team meeting, or a networking event, stop trying to be the most interesting person in the room. Instead, play the role of the orchestra conductor. Your goal is not to play the loudest instrument. Your goal is to direct the flow of the music. Consciously look for the person who is being spoken over or left out. Use your eye contact, your body language, and your questions to bring them into the fold. Say things like, "David, you have a lot of experience in this area. What is your take?" Or, "I want to make sure we hear from Emily on this." By becoming the distributor of attention and value, rather than a desperate consumer of it, you automatically assume the highest status position in the psychology of the group. You become the charismatic center. Chapter 9. Charisma Under Crisis. Maintaining Magnetism in Chaos. Narrator. The pacing slows down here.
The tone becomes intense, serious, and deeply grounded. Speak with the heavy, reassuring rhythm of a pilot navigating a storm. We have explored how to project charisma in controlled environments, but the ultimate, unforgiving test of the charisma code is not how you perform at a cocktail party or during a rehearsed pitch. The ultimate test is what happens when the environment shatters. What happens when $1 billion deal falls apart at the last second? What happens when a vital piece of technology fails during your presentation in front of 500 people? What happens when a public conflict erupts, when someone attacks you aggressively, or when a literal, physical emergency breaks out? In moments of crisis, the masks fall off, the superficial charm evaporates, the true architecture of a person's nervous system is exposed to the world. When a crisis hits, human biology takes over. The brain perceives a threat to its survival or its social standing. The amygdala screams. The adrenal glands dump massive amounts of adrenaline and cortisol into the bloodstream. The physiological effects are violent and immediate. The heart rate spikes, breathing becomes shallow and erratic, the muscles tense, preparing for fight or flight. Blood is pulled away from the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for logic, rational thought, and social nuance, and diverted to the limbs. In a crisis, the average person literally loses their capacity to think clearly. They become reactive. Their voice gets high-pitched and breathless. Their eyes dart frantically. They speak too fast. They stutter, or they freeze completely. Because of the law of emotional contagion and mirror neurons, this panic is highly infectious. If a leader panics, the panic ripples through the group at the speed of light. The entire room descends into chaos. But this exact biological mechanism is also why moments of crisis offer the single greatest opportunity to project a legendary, world-bending charisma. In a moment of chaos, people do not look for the smartest person. They do not look for the best-looking person. They desperately, biologically scan the room for the most emotionally stable person. If everyone around you is vibrating at a high-pitched, frantic frequency of panic, and you remain anchored at a low, slow, unyielding frequency of absolute calm, the group's mirror neurons will violently latch onto you. You become the psychological life raft. They will defer to your authority instantly, blindly, and completely. This is the charisma of the stoic general, the veteran surgeon, and the master crisis negotiator. It's the phenomenon of grace under pressure. The neurochemistry of the circuit breaker. You cannot stop the initial spike of adrenaline when a crisis hits. You're a human. The chemical dump will happen. Your heart will hammer against your ribs. The difference between the charismatic leader and the panicking follower is not the absence of fear. It's the management of the physiological response to that fear. You must learn how to act as a circuit breaker for your own nervous system, and by extension, the nervous system of the room. 1. The box breathing. The physiological override. When the crisis hits, the first thing that fails is your breath. You begin chest breathing, which signals to your brain that you are dying, creating a feedback loop of escalating panic. You must manually override your autonomic nervous system. You do this through box breathing, a technique utilized by Navy SEALs and elite special forces before breaching a compound. Inhale deeply through your nose, expanding your stomach, for a slow count of 4. Hold that breath in your lungs for a count of 4. Exhale smoothly through your mouth for a count of 4. Hold your lungs empty for a count of 4. You only need to complete 1 or 2 cycles of this. It takes less than 10 seconds. In those 10 seconds, you manually force your heart rate to slow down. You signal to your brain via the vagus nerve that you are safe. You force blood back into your prefrontal cortex, bringing your logic and your charismatic presence back online. 2. The vocal anchor, the counter frequency. When people panic, they speak fast and high. To establish dominance and calm the room, you must deliberately do the exact opposite. You must consciously force your voice to drop an octave lower than you normally speak. You must drastically reduce your pacing, speaking 30% slower than your normal cadence. And you must utilize heavy,
unyielding downward inflections at the end of every single sentence. Imagine you are leading a team and a critical server crashes, deleting weeks of work right before a deadline. The team is frantic, people are shouting. If you say, "Oh my God, what happened? We need to fix this right now," high pitch, fast pace, upward inflection, you amplify the panic. You have lost the room. Instead, you run the box breath, you anchor your feet, you lower your voice to a deep, resonant rumble, and you speak slowly with immense gravity. Everyone stop, 2-second pause, take your hands off the keyboards, downward inflection. We are going to assess the damage. John, pull the backup logs. Sarah, get the client on the phone. We will solve this. You have just acted as a massive, heavy blanket thrown over a fire. Your low, slow vocal frequency acts as an anchor. The team's mirror neurons will automatically sync to your vocal rhythm. Their heart rates will drop to match yours. You have completely neutralized the chaos through sheer emotional control. Dealing with aggressive public conflict. What if the crisis is a direct, aggressive attack on you? What if someone screams at you in a meeting or aggressively insults you in front of a crowd? The biological urge to fight back, to match their aggression, or to defend your ego is overwhelming. But matching their energy means surrendering your frame. When someone attacks you publicly, they are offering you a gift. They are destroying their own status by looking erratic, emotional, and out of control. All you have to do is provide the contrast. You deploy the ultimate form of amused mastery. You do not interrupt them, you let them yell, you maintain soft, warm eye contact, not a glare, but the look of a deeply patient therapist dealing with an irrational patient. You relax every muscle in your face. When they finish their aggressive tirade, they will be breathing heavily, expecting you to shout back. You unleash the weaponized pause. You let 3 full seconds of dead silence hang in the air. The silence will make their aggressive outburst echo awkwardly in the room. They will begin to feel foolish. Then, you lower your voice, lean back slightly, and say quietly, "Are you finished?" Pause. Good. Now let's address the actual facts of the situation. You have absolutely devastated their attack without raising your heart rate. You have demonstrated to the entire room that you are completely unshakable. Your magnetic gravity is absolute. Practice Application 9, the Eye of the Storm Protocol. You must train for chaos in times of peace. You cannot learn to swim during a hurricane. For the next month, you will practice the Eye of the Storm Protocol during minor, low-stakes moments of stress. When someone cuts you off in traffic, when you drop a glass and it shatters on the floor, when you receive a highly frustrating email. Do not allow your body to perform its habitual reaction. Do not curse, do not sigh heavily, do not type a frantic reply. The moment the minor stressor happens, freeze, close your eyes, run 1 complete cycle of the box breath. 4 seconds in, 4 hold, 4 out, 4 hold. Manually relax your jaw and drop your shoulders. Only after you have forced your nervous system back into absolute baseline calm are you allowed to react to the situation. By training your nervous system to respond to minor stress with instant, enforced calmness, you are building the neurological pathways required to maintain your charismatic power when a true crisis inevitably strikes. You will become the eye of the storm. Chapter 10: The Dark Side of Charisma and the Ethical Boundary. We have spent hours deconstructing the hidden mechanics of the human mind. You now possess the blueprint for the charisma code. You know how to hijack the mirror neuron system to manufacture trust. You know how to use the Duchenne Smile to synthesize warmth. You know how to deploy the pregnant pause to generate psychological pressure. You know how to manipulate conversational frames to establish dominance, and how to weaponize your vocal resonance to command authority during a crisis. These tools are incredibly potent. They bypass logic and interact directly with the primal emotional centers of the human brain. And because they are so potent, we must have a brutally honest conversation about the dark side of charisma and the ethical boundary that separates profound influence from toxic manipulation.
The weaponization of charm, the dark triad. Psychologists recognize a cluster of personality traits known as the dark triad: narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy. Individuals who possess these traits are often devastatingly charismatic. They understand the mechanics of presence, power, and warmth, but they use them as a mask. The sociopathic CEO, the manipulative cult leader, the serial con artist, they all utilize the exact same psychological architecture we have discussed in this audiobook. They use deep eye contact to feign empathy. They use strategic silence to dominate. They use the appearance of warmth to lower your defenses so they can extract value, resources, or compliance from you. Charisma, in its rawest form, is an amoral force. It is like fire or nuclear energy. It does not possess a conscience. It is simply a mechanism of power. The morality of the charisma code is entirely dependent on the character of the person wielding it. If you use these tools to deceive, to exploit vulnerabilities, or to force people into actions that harm them for your own benefit, you are crossing the line into manipulation.
The biological toll of the facade. But beyond morality, there is a purely scientific reason why using charisma as a deceptive mask is a strategy doomed to catastrophic failure. It is called cognitive load. Your brain consumes an enormous amount of energy. When you are being authentic, when your internal emotional state genuinely matches the external body language and vocal tone you are projecting, your brain operates efficiently. The signals flow naturally. When you use the techniques in this book to project warmth that you do not actually feel, or to project confidence when you are entirely consumed by malicious intent, you are forcing your brain to run a massive, complex simulation. You have to constantly monitor your microexpressions. You have to consciously suppress your true malicious instincts. You have to calculate every pause and every inflection. This requires an immense, draining amount of cognitive load. Over time, it is biologically exhausting. Eventually, the mask slips. Fatigue sets in. You will experience a micro-expression of contempt when you should be smiling. Your voice will crack with impatience when it should be warm. The human brain is the greatest lie detector ever created by evolution. The people around you will subconsciously detect the incongruence between your words and your micro-signals. The moment they sense the manipulation, the charisma shatters. The trust evaporates instantly, replaced by a deep, visceral revulsion. Once you are exposed as a manipulator, you can never regain your magnetic gravity in that environment. The necessity of authenticity. Therefore, the ultimate secret to sustaining the charisma code for a lifetime is absolute authenticity. You cannot view these techniques as a costume you put on to trick the world. You must view them as channels to express the best, most powerful version of who you already are. When you use the favorite person visualization to project warmth, you are not faking warmth. You are accessing a genuine reservoir of love that exists inside you and applying it to the present moment. When you use the downward inflection to project power, you must genuinely cultivate a belief in your own competence and your right to take up space in the world. The goal is not to become a highly skilled actor playing the role of a charismatic person. The goal is to align your internal reality with your external presence. Influence is using your magnetic gravity to guide people toward a mutual benefit. It is using your power to protect the room and your warmth to elevate the people in it. It is making people feel smarter, stronger, and safer precisely because they are in your presence. When your intent is pure, the charisma code does not drain your energy. It multiplies it. It becomes a self-sustaining cycle of authentic connection and profound impact. Conclusion: the integration and the magnetic life. You have reached the end of the code. You have journeyed from the biological mechanics of the ancient savannah to the high-stakes psychology of modern boardrooms. You have dismantled the myth that charisma is a magical gift bestowed upon a lucky few at birth.
You now understand that magnetic presence is an applied science. It is a discipline. It is a choice you make every single time you open a door, take a breath, and look another human being in the eyes. But reading about the science or listening to the theory is not enough. Knowing the mechanics of a bicycle does not mean you know how to ride it. You must get on the bike and you must pedal. You must take the practices we have outlined, the toe wiggle for grounding, the resonant chest exercise for vocal depth, the lighthouse gaze for group dynamics, and the box breath for crisis control, and you must integrate them into the cellular memory of your body. At first, it will feel clumsy. You will feel self-conscious. You will forget to pause. You will accidentally use an upward inflection. You will lose the frame in a heated argument. That is not failure. That is the process of neurological rewiring. You must persist. You must run the repetitions. You must practice the discipline of presence when you are tired. You must practice the architecture of power when you feel small. You must practice the magnetism of warmth when you are frustrated. And then, one day, something profound will happen. You will stop doing the techniques, and you will simply become the charismatic presence. The cognitive load will vanish. The behaviors will become instinctual. You will walk into a crowded room, and without a single conscious thought, your posture will expand, your breath will deepen, and your face will radiate an irresistible, welcoming warmth. You will watch the energy of the room physically shift to accommodate you. You will feel the social gravity bending toward your center. You will speak, and your voice will carry the heavy, resonant weights of absolute authority. You will hold the silence, and you will watch people lean in, desperate for your next word. You will no longer be invisible. You will no longer be overlooked, talked over, or dismissed. You will possess the rare, almost dangerous ability to alter reality, to move minds, to forge unbreakable loyalties, and to leave a lasting, indelible mark on every single person you meet. You now hold the keys to the invisible architecture of human influence. The code is yours. Now go out and change the world. Thank you for listening to Quick Audiobooks. If this journey has transformed the way you view human interaction, ensure you subscribe and return for more deep dives into the science of power, psychology, and influence. Until next time, stay present, stay powerful, and stay magnetic.